All right. Um, so this is something special. So today, over the weekend, we were informed that Jeremy Hammond was going to be shipped to a prison near Virginia and compelled to testify in the grand jury that's convened regarding WikiLeaks Julian Assange. Jeremy Hammond is, of course, my former colleague who I worked with on the Stratfor deal to some extent, and also some other deals. Basically, what I went to prison over this whole incident. Incidentally, it's unknown if I'm going to be affected by this. I sincerely doubt they're going to try to get me to testify. They know how I tend to use those kinds of situations. But I want to just highlight something that happened just about a couple hours ago. Del Cameron, who has done some great work on all of this for years and years, wrote a story that I tweeted out today about the background here. Unlike the other stories you'll see in the Washington Post, CNN, and all that, this one really on this matter. This one does go into what this is all really about, what happened, the FBI's dishonest, fraudulent accounting of whether or not they knew about the hack of Stratfor, whether or not they participated in it, oversaw it, allowed it to happen, which they quite clearly did, and that was clear from 2012 when the first was revealed that that Sabu, who was involved in the hack, was their longtime informant and cooperator. So Del Cameron notes in a story entitled Inside the Stratfor Hack, a New York Times reporter labeled as conspiracy theorists anyone who believed the FBI had simply allowed the attack to occur. Now, as he goes and explains here, as has been explained previously number of times, they absolutely let the attack occur. I mean, even by their own accounting, they did not stop the attack. They told Stratfor, just let it happen. They let it happen. They knew about it well before I did. I think they knew about it before Jeremy Hammond did. And they may have conducted it themselves, and those are things that are a little bit harder to establish at this point with public records, but there's no question about that. Anyway, he also points out, he points to he points to this article from the New York Times back then, and I tweeted out this Del Cameron's article and noted that piece from the New York Times back then was written by Nicole Perlroth, who I used to deal with. I was one of her sources, etc. Number of things. Let me pull up the proper thing here, make sure I'm not showing anything I shouldn't. Okay. So I tweeted out the article and quoted it, which is pretty common. And then I pointed out as well who wrote it. And that was Nicole Perlroth, which is New York Times' cybersecurity reporter. She should not be the New York Times' cybersecurity reporter, incidentally, but nonetheless, it is true. New York Times reporter labeled as conspiracy theorists anyone who believed the FBI had simply allowed the attack to occur. That's what Del wrote. And then I add, that would be Nicole Perlroth. Better luck next time, Nicole. Sort of making fun of Nicole Perlroth. A few minutes later, I get this direct message from Nicole, who I'd never spoken to via Twitter before. I think I do have old email correspondence from her, but back then, I get this message. Is this a threat? Followed by, I have no recollection of this, referring to the article she wrote, which is quite clearly noted in my tweet. My first reaction is to ask what the fuck she's talking about, and I write, a threat? I'm gonna proceed. I'll just do the whole thing, doing her voice and my voice. Make this a little easier. So, is this a threat? I have no recollection of this. And I write, a threat? And she writes, better luck next time, Nicole, quoting me. And I ask, you're asking me if better luck next time, unquote, is a threat? And then she writes, yes, next time what? And I write, that's actually a question you're asking me? And she writes, yes, are you threatening me? Do I need to report that? Because I'm doing her British accent. And I write, is this the first time you've come across the phrase, better luck next time? Just keep scrolling here. And then I'm sorry about the shakiness. Let me get my elbows in her. Repaste the whole tweet and ask yourself whether in that context it sounds like a targeted threat. No, it's a targeted threat. And of course, as you just saw, the tweet was pointing out that she wrote the article and saying better luck next time. Also, I have no idea what you're referring to regarding conspiracy theory. And then I pointed something you wrote in an article. And she goes, what article? Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll wonder how the fuck she's, like, how could, I mean, so I just write this article, and I link to her article, Inside the Stratfor Attack, which is quite clearly mentioned in those tweets there. And then she says, referring to this website, and then she links to Crikey, and I determined that's what she means is that she was referring to them as an example of conspiracy theories. But again, the article, this doesn't really matter, but this was an article in which, using the stuff that was already public way back in 2012, they just go into the fact that the FBI, they had their cooperator overseeing this hack, and that, that's thus, kind of crazy. And that it's not like it's a theory, it's the FBI's own account involves them orchestrating the threat. Mueller bragged about this in 2013 in a speech. It's transcribed, you can see it, it's public. Anyway, and she continues. Now remember, this woman has just apparently been threatened, but she's back to business here. So that's very admirable. You really got to give her credit for after having received this violent threat from me, in which I told her better luck next time. She's just, her nerves are steeled, and she's just back to business. What is the other article you're referring to that says the FBI was involved in the breach? What are the logs showing that they knew about this prior to December 6th? And I don't know what this woman does and doesn't know. She doesn't even know what her own article was, so we're still making progress, though. So I offered them to him. I said, you want them? I said, you want them? You want them? That's what I sound like. And she goes, were they published? I'm like, sure thing. I'll have someone email them to you. This will insulate me any further from further threats to report my non-threats. She goes, I don't want to solicit them if they have not been made public. Now, let me stop right there, because that's a journalist saying that, like, I don't want to ask for something even if they have not yet been made public. That explains a great deal about everything, about how fucked up everything is. This is a New York Times cybersecurity reporter, incidentally, people. She should have been sound the alarms. That's going to sound the alarms. Sound the alarms. Sorry, that's an inside joke to somebody. Comment. And she goes, okay. And I say, yes, they were published 5 years ago. Yes, they were published. And she writes, link. Why is this the first time you bring this to my attention? Because I'm her fucking intern now, apparently. And I was responding early first to this. Not going to interact with you directly any further. We'll have Emma Best or someone get in touch. Emma Best runs DDoS. She's our partner on the 29 Leaks thing, and she's also kind of the curator of a lot of these old files. But again, a lot of them are public anyway. But then I see her bizarre question, why is this the first time you're bringing this to my attention? And I write, because I was in prison over this. Jesus fuck. I was in prison. Yo. And she writes, excuse me? Because I've just cursed in front of a lady. And I write, I was in prison for a while over this hack because the press is incompetent. Go away now, I'm playing video games threatening people. And then she writes, I know this. She doesn't. She doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. You don't have... I'm sorry, this is kind of... Here we go. Get my elbows settled. You don't have to shout or tweet target me. You hacked a company and tipped off an FBI informant. Now, this is not anything close to what even the DHA has claimed. I'm not a hacker. The FBI informant knew perfectly well about this well before I did. This is fucking crazy. You did not go to jail because I or anyone on the press is incompetent. Let's leave this one here. Have a good day. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who leaves this kind of thing here when I've just been told that I'm a hacker. It happens a lot, unfortunately. And I write, I hacked a company. You can tell I'm not a hacker because of my deep voice. And I tipped off the FBI informant. This is what I mean by the press being incompetent, Nicole. Now that, surprisingly, she refrains from claiming that's been another threat. But I'm sorry, I literally have no idea what you're talking about. Again, that part is true, I guarantee you. Maybe reach out to me when you're interested in having a real discussion. Okay. And I write, okay, so then meanwhile, as this is happening, I'm tweeting out screenshots of this because, because it's just beyond. It's beyond everything. And, where is it? Okay, so I'm posting out screenshots, and then she replied, and then I retweeted her reply on Twitter, so we changed mediums here. Now, you can't see it because she's deleted it now, but I wrote, according to New York Times star reporter Nicole Perlwith, and notice here, I'm not showing what she just told me in the DMs there. I'm showing her the tweet she just wrote replying to my tweets, showing her screenshots. So she made the same claim here on Twitter. I hacked a company and took off an FBI informant in the process. Now, you've just seen her make that claim on the DMs. She made it on Twitter. I linked to it, and then she deletes it, which is why it's no longer available. You can go take a look there on my Twitter. This is sort of up there. Yeah, so that's weird. Wait, so let's go back to the DMs here. So she deletes it, and people are asking her now. You can see, like, asking her, okay, so what did that tweet say? Like, unfortunately, I didn't get a screenshot of it, but again, I have her saying the exact same thing right at the same time on my DMs, and blah, blah, blah. Or someone asked her somewhere, I don't know. I can't, she's blocked me, so I can't see her deals. But if you go look at Nicole Pro-Ross Twitter account, you can see people asking her, what was that tweet you just deleted? Like, was it what this guy just said? Blah, blah, blah. Remember, this is a New York Times reporter. And that is going to be shocking to some people, and less so to others, like me, who have dealt with the New York Times. And, you know, every time you deal with them, you want to just cut off your balls and just swallow them, because it's terrible. I've done it over and over again, these fucking people. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yes, all right. You just tweeted out a claim to this very same effect and then deleted it. That's a bit unusual, isn't it? And now she won't even address that. Again, happy to have a real discussion anytime, but she's screenshotting my questions. I screenshotted her claim that I threatened her and I'm a hacker. And targeting me out of the blue like this. Apparently we're supposed to have a relationship. You know, there has to be a courtship period before I actually refer to her on Twitter regarding an article about something I went to prison over. Targeting me out of the blue like this is not very productive. I'm still targeting her. Have a good one. And then I actually ask you, are you high? And then she says, blocked. It's the most irritating fucking thing when people actually say that. Just block me. You don't need to fucking tell me. Anyway, so that's what happened with her. And, yeah. So, again, there's a lot more to this. And aside from all the other issues that are raised here regarding the press, and also sort of coinciding with those issues, there's a very good reason that all this stuff went down like it did years ago, and why it's now cropping up in the way that it did and ought not to. And that is because people like Nicole Pro-Ross and outlets like the New York Times are basically unaccountable for what they do. And they are unaccountable to themselves. They have no moral structure, to stop them and say, hey, I just accused this guy of being a hacker, and that's not really true. And I just did it publicly and deleted it, and I denied that. That's kind of fucked up. She's not at all concerned that she wrote something vastly false and took the FBI's word for it, and that people are in prison that shouldn't be, and that I was one of those people. Doesn't occur to her at all. She wants to know why I'm just now letting her know about how the FBI lied to her about stuff that was already public. That's literally the first thing that occurs to her. So Jeremy Hammond has just lost all of his good time, his accrued time that he would get off for good behavior. He's being compelled to testify, and the press is going to fuck us up once again. And outlets like the New York Times especially, and I know the New York Times I don't think has reported on this, whereas the Washington Post, CNN have, because it's news. It is not just, it's not in their interest, it is antagonistic to their interests to cover this story correctly, because doing so will will sort of bring back some other another chance to kind of go over what happened back then and who fucked up and how ill-served we are by the press. And that's a scandal here that just overrides all the other scandals. It's more important than whether or not I wrongfully went to prison, whether or not Jeremy Hammond is being persecuted, Assange, WikiLeaks. This is a press issue ultimately. It's an issue of public information. It's an issue of how a society can function and whether or not it is getting anything close to what it needs in order to keep itself a free society, as opposed to a feudal technocracy run by Peter Thiel and Palantir and these other companies and state corporate interests, aligned against the public. The situation is so much worse than one might expect, even a well-informed person. People who are, read a wide variety of sources, are capable of kind of sifting through things, determining credibility. It gets so much worse the deeper down you go and the more you interact with the press. And it's not, due to some centralized plot run by the intelligence community. Those things have happened in the past and will still continue to happen and happen now to some extent. But the real problem here is unfortunately it's worse than that. It's harder, it's more intractable. And the problem is cultural. It's that we have allowed incompetence and amorality and unethical behavior to run free, to run rampant throughout the press and the government and everything else. The press has to be purged, quite frankly. It has to be cleaned up, and the way to do that is to expose and to document in a way that is hard to ignore, impossible to ignore, the wrongdoing, the ongoing malfeasance that major outlets that have earned credibility over a century have allowed to occur under their watch, at their publications, in ways that have destroyed lives and that have destroyed public consciousness, that have wreaked havoc on the public's ability to understand what is happening. You've just seen an instance of that. You've seen an instance of someone going to every measure, every possible option, aside from admitting, I may have made a mistake here, and I'm going to go change that. I'm going to go rectify that. That will never occur. They will never do this. And that's not, I don't get this from this one incident. I've collected these incidents. And some of those you'll see in my book next year. Some of those you'll see in some of the articles I've already put out. You can see them on Medium. Stuff I used to do for Vanity Fair back in the day, blah, blah. My Twitter account, there's tons of this. It involves Reuters, it includes, Gawker, which no longer exists, but the people there have gone on to the New York Times or the New Yorker, New York Magazine, The Intercept, where I used to write a column from prison, incidentally. It is extraordinary, the degree of it, and it has to be addressed. And so when we start talking about Operation Hastings, named after my old colleague Michael Hastings, when we start asking for volunteers to do crowdsourced research to help good journalists and to audit the work of journalists who are not so good or who don't want to be good, who don't care, when we start asking for volunteers and asking for assistance with that, please be ready to provide that, because this kind of thing is, it affects every single issue. No matter what your issue is, or what you believe in, all of these things are, the work and the risk and the sacrifices are all just obliterated. They're obliterated and made meaningless. And all it takes is incompetence, a stray mistake, a refusal to address mistakes, refusal to pay proper attention to things that have in the past have shown to matter. All it takes is incompetence. And that incompetence is not going to address itself. It has to be addressed so decisively and so unanswerably that eventually they give in, and in the meantime, press outlets that do a much better job of that sort of thing begin to gain more influence among people who pay attention. It's a process that has to occur on several fronts, and it has to begin very soon. So please be ready for when that begins. Thank you.